Whoop. Why am I always off axis? Always off axis. Hello and welcome. I'm Peter, and this is part 3, the final chapter of the season 3 patch notes for Bryan Fury. Now, if you've been following along, we've gone over Bryan's new move, Snake Rampage, and in part 2, we went over a bunch of the patch notes regarding Bryan's moves. Now, in part 3, we're gonna finish all that up, wrap it together, and basically bring it all home. So, without further ado, let's go! First up, Hammer Driver. I bet you did not know that this was the name for the move. Anyhow, down 1+2. In Season 2, this move was incredibly hard and excruciatingly difficult to land. Mostly because you literally had to be at point blank range at 0, and I mean 0, where you're rubbing against the opponent. Any tiny bit of movement backwards, as you can see here, we have a little bit of movement back, and the first hit will miss, and yeah, you don't get both hits. My bad, this is probably too big of a step. Even a tiny, the most minuscule of steps back, and the first hit will not hit. So what they did in Season 3 for this is basically increase the range of the attack. In Season 3, now you can be further back and the first hit will land. However, this does not make this a good move because it still has range issues and there's only so many things that you can do afterwards. And yeah, this, I guess you could call it a micro buff, but honestly, it's negligible. Snake Bomb, down 1+2, 2. This was also a move that I guess had range issues in Season 2. Honestly, I can't really say too much about this, aside from the fact that in Season 2, it had a lack of range, and on hit, this was a launcher, and on block, it gave you all of 2 frames. Yeah. This is generally a bad move. They buffed it ever so slightly in Season 3. In Season 3, as you can see, it has a little bit more range, but this doesn't really salvage the move in any way whatsoever. It still launches on regular hit and gives you +2 on block, I guess. But because of how slow this move starts up, it starts up in 45 frames, which is virtually unusable here. To give you a comparison, Bryan's Unblockable is 53 frames. This is 8 frames faster, but at 45 frames to start up, like, this is beyond seeable in terms of like even a snake edge. So this is not, I don't even consider this a buff to Bryan because this move is so rarely used, and the fact that it gives you only +2 frames on block makes it not great. Alright, we finally get to our first substantial buff for Bryan, and I want to say substantial buff. Some people don't necessarily agree with me on this, but we'll agree to disagree. Anyhow, back 1, Chopping Elbow. Bryan has gotten a buff to this move. As we know, back 1 in Season 2, this was +3 on block. Now, in Season 4, this is plus Season 4, geez. Wow, I guess we've already gone to Season 4. No, yeah. Season 3. In Season 3, Bryan has gotten one more frame. So now it's +4 on block. So what does this mean really? Because some people who might not necessarily understand the ins and outs of frame data, they might wonder like, well, it's just 1 frame. How big can this 1 frame be? In my opinion, I think this 1 frame is a huge world of difference, because in Season 2, after back 1, you could check an opponent with down forward 2. However, if they throw out something like a dick jab, you just trade with them. And this is not something you necessarily always wanted, right? You wanted to actually be ahead and be able to snuff them out before they do any attack. And this is more than obvious against two characters, Fang and Jack 7. So in season 2, if you threw out back 1 and decided to check with down forward 2 against Fang or Jack 7, you were going to get counter hits. Fang has back 1, and on counter hit it guarantees him an Iron Mountain, his back 1+2, his shoulder, right? And Jack, at 10 frames, he gets a counter hit with his stop sign hand. I don't know the name of it, but stop sign hand. And he would get a guaranteed boot afterwards, even on trade with your down forward 2. So this was something that the main thing that back 1 in season 3 had faults on. You couldn't check an opponent with a down forward 2 to guarantee a mid check. What you had to do was like a dick jab, and that wasn't always ideal either. But now in season 3, because it gets one more frame, essentially this means that you can now go from back 1 into down forward 2, and you would beat out things like dick jabs, right, and other 10 frame moves. So in the case of Fang, if you went for back 1 and he went for a back 1 while you're going for your down forward 2, you're going to snuff him out before he's able to get his counter hit out by 1 frame. And the same thing goes for Jack, right? You stop him right before he is able to counter hit you with his palm. So this is a great change. Now, the last thing I want to bring to your attention is the fact that down 2 was buffed in season 3. We all know this, it's plus 8 frames now and still forces your opponent into crouch. And down 2 is 14 frames to come out. Because back 1 now gives plus 4 frames, this means that any 10 frame move, such as a dick jab or a regular jab, this stuff now trades unevenly with down 2. Because your opponent is forced into crouch at -8, you basically have free reign now to do whatever the hell you want. So, in my opinion, this back 1 buff to chopping elbow is a fantastic buff to Bryan. Having more frames on a pressure move is always a welcome pleasure. Forward to Mach Punch. For those of you who did not know, Bryan's Mach Punch is -10 on block. And this was something that always baffled me because most of the high power crushes in the game are safe. And when I mean most, I mean like all but 3 high power crush moves were safe. So Bryan was one of those characters. And for those of you who didn't know, there are 2 characters who out in the open could punish this. One of them being Jack. Jack could punish Mach Punch with forward 2 in season 2. This was a bit hard, and by a bit I mean very hard to do, but it still could be done. And Gigas, who had a much easier time punishing Mach Punch out in the open. So this was something that baffled me because most characters who have a high power crush, it was safe, but Bryan's wasn't the case. And before you say like, oh, this wall only applies to 2 characters, no, that's not true, because if this ever happens near a wall, any character who has a 10 frame jab or jab string could punish Bryan. In this case, we have Kazuya and Bryan, and Kazuya at the wall, because of the reduced pushback, he gets 1-1-2 as his 10 frame punish to Mach Punch. But in season 3, this was changed. In season 3 now, Mach Punch is -9, which aligns nicely with all the other rules about high power crush moves being not punishable. So Bryan's Mach Punch now no longer can be punished by things like Jack's forward 2 out in the open or Gigas's 1-2 out in the open. And at the wall, obviously, because it's -9, it's not jab punishable anymore. So this is a very welcome buff, especially at the wall, right? This is probably the most likely occasion for this to have happened in Season 2, so being able to throw out a Power Crush against your opponent while they have their back to the wall is a welcome buff. The other change is very, very minor. Bryan gets all of 1 extra recovery frame on this, on hit, and I guess it's a okay buff. Not really. It's not really a buff. Okay, let's just focus on the fact that it's -9 now and not -10. Next big significant buff, and this applies to 2 moves. I'm going to lump them together here because they more or less fall into the same category. That's Mach Kick, which is forward, forward, 4, and Sway Smash, which is quarter circle back, 2, 4. Now, these 2 moves received the same buff, which is a huge quality of life change for Bryan, and very significant in that regards. So, Mach Punch, oh my gosh. Mach Kick. Mach Kick now brings the opponent closer in Season 3 than in Season 2. So let me go over what happened in Season 2. In Season 2, if you did Mach Kick or if you did a Sway Smash, this could be followed up with a quarter circle back 4, a soccer kick. And while this was doable up close, if you landed Mach Kick up close to your opponent at range, I guess 0 or range 1, you could get a pretty easy micro dash into soccer kick, and in some cases you didn't even have to micro dash if it was close enough. But the issue arose when you were slightly further out. If you landed a Mach Kick further out, you had to be pitch perfect in order to land that soccer kick. If you micro dashed too short, your quarter circle back 4, your soccer kick would whiff. If you dashed too far in, what would happen is your soccer kick would get blocked. So this was a pain in the ass, especially because sometimes you never know what range Mach Kick is going to land at, if your opponent's moving in or if they're moving back or like whatever. So in Season 3 now, this has been a great change for Bryan. And Mach Punch, oh my gosh, why do I keep saying Mach Punch? Mach Kick, as well as Sway Smash, now bring the opponent closer in Season 3. Which means it's going to be much easier to land that soccer kick afterwards. At, I guess, range 1 to range 0, you no longer have to really be super precise with your micro dash into soccer kick. In some cases, you can just straight up just soccer kick them, even at further ranges, right? But if you want to land this from, I guess, a Mach Kick that's coming out from downtown from range 3, then you're still going to have to do a micro dash into a soccer kick. And the timing still can be very finicky, but nonetheless, this has been a great quality of life change for Bryan. So good buff, very solid in my opinion. Wedge driver cancel. Back, down, forward, 4 back. So Bryan gets a buff from Season 2 to Season 3 on his Wedge driver cancel. He now recovers 3 frames faster when he cancels Wedge driver. In Season 2, this was a bit slower, and honestly, this move is not used all that much. It's kind of one of those knowledge tests slash gimmicky mix-up tools. So Wedge driver comes out in 29 frames, which is exactly the same number of frames as Snake Edge. It's mostly able to be low parried on reaction if your opponent's used to the animation. So what you could do is you could cancel it into something like Chains of Misery. So when your opponent goes to low parry it, then while they don't see the kick come out, they stand up, and then you could throw them with Chains of Misery. You could also wedge driver cancel into something like an orbital, right? If they remain crouching to try to block wedge driver, you can do an orbital mix-up. The other option is you could wedge driver cancel into a hatchet kick. So there's a lot of different tiny little mix-ups that Bryan could do from this, and just having 3 more frames on a cancel so it doesn't put you nearly as minus, is a nice quality of life change, a very micro buff for Bryan. So I think I'm going to start trying this out a little bit more in season 3, because it did get a buff, albeit not a huge buff, but a small buff. And as we play these footages, you can see the differences in terms of how quickly it recovers. So I encourage you guys, if you want to try out some wedge driver gimmicks, mix-ups, go for it. I think it's, I don't know, it's fun to try out. Last but not least, we have the buff to soccer kick, quarter circle back 4. Now in season 2, this used to do 21 damage, and now in season 3, we have gained an extra 2 points of damage for it. So going from 21 to 23. Now this also applies to his combos as well. Any of Bryan's season 2 combos that he did out of quarter circle back 4. Now in season 3, we also get 2 more damage out of it, which, hey, can't complain about damage, right? More damage is always better, even if it's 2 damage is better than no damage. But this isn't really the reason why I think this is a nice buff. It's not because of the combo, because in my experience, rarely would you get a soccer kick launcher, because most of the opponents aren't really ducking for soccer kick. But the main reason why I think this is a great buff is because of Mach Kick's buff. Because Mach Kick leaves the opponent now closer on hit, it allows you to get more of a guaranteed soccer kick. So because of that, you get 2 more damage on a guaranteed ground hit. And this, in my opinion, because of the synergy of it, is very, very nice, and it lines up quite well. So to summarize everything from part 2 and part 3, basically Bryan got a lot of quality of life changes and very much needed buffs. Whether this will make him, tournament viable in terms of S tier is to be determined. I personally don't think it's going to make him S tier, but he'll definitely be more solid. And the general consensus is that the season 3 changes have allowed Bryan to be more rounded as a character. He now has a standing 12 frame punish. He also has one of the strongest non-launching 13 frame low punishes. And in addition to that, they decided to round out Bryan's pressure game by allowing the opponents to be closer to him on hit. So things like down 2, right? Give him plus 8 frames now, leave the opponent closer. PK combo 2-3, it leaves the opponent closer. And in addition, Mach Kick on hit leaves the opponent closer to be able to be hit by soccer kick more consistently. So I think this is fantastic changes for Bryan. I have been enjoying it, and I hope you guys have too. So with that, I want to say one last thing. Please, guys, if you've enjoyed the editing by Crossroads, and he has been the one who's edited the last 3 videos, please in the Discord give him a shout out. If you're in the Discord, if you want to leave a comment, please do so. He has been so integral in helping me push these videos out. You have no idea. And with that, if you enjoyed this content at all, please go ahead and leave a comment, like, subscribe, and thank you, patrons. You guys also have no idea how helpful your funds have been in helping this channel grow, especially because now that we're able to fund Crossroads and helping me edit these videos. Thank you guys so much. Well, with that, I just want to say, I'm Peter. Season 3 is out. Go enjoy those Bryan changes. Haha, take care, guys. I'll see you next time.